Imagine you're at a busy cafe. You reach for your latte, but your hand slips. The cup tips, coffee splashes across the table, and for a split second, the world goes silent. You feel a heat rising in your neck. You're certain every single person in the room, the barista, the student in the corner, the couple by the window, is staring at you, thinking about how clumsy you are. Your heart races as you scramble for napkins, feeling like the main character in a very embarrassing movie. But here's the secret. In reality, most people didn't even look up from their phones. This intense feeling that the world is watching our every move is called the spotlight effect. Why does it feel so real when it's almost always an illusion? The spotlight effect is a psychological phenomenon where we tend to overestimate how much others notice our appearance or our actions. It's like we're walking around with a giant invisible spotlight following us, illuminating every stain on our shirt or every stutter in our speech. We live our lives from a first-person perspective, so naturally, we are the center of our own universe. Because we are so focused on our own internal experience, we assume everyone else is just as focused on us too. But have you ever stopped to think about what everyone else is doing? They're busy standing in their own spotlight, worrying about their own coffee spills and their own messy hair. To understand this better, researchers once conducted a fascinating experiment. They asked a group of students to wear a cringe-worthy t-shirt, something they found genuinely embarrassing, and walk into a room full of their peers. The students wearing the shirts were convinced that at least half the room would notice the embarrassing graphic. But when the researchers interviewed the observers afterward, only a tiny fraction, about 20%, actually noticed the shirt at all. We are hyper-aware of our flaws because we've been staring at them in the mirror, but to the rest of the world, they are just background noise. We are essentially our own harshest critics, projecting our self-consciousness onto strangers who are barely paying attention. Why do we do this to ourselves? It actually comes from a very deep evolutionary place. Back when humans lived in small tribes, being noticed for the wrong reasons, social blunders, or breaking norms, could mean being cast out of the group. In the wild, social rejection was a death sentence. So, our brains developed a high-sensitivity radar for anything that might make us look bad to the tribe. Even though we now live in a world of billions, that ancient radar is still pinging. We feel that spotlight because our brains are trying to protect us from social mistakes. It's an old survival mechanism that hasn't quite caught up to the modern, anonymous world we live in today. At the heart of the spotlight effect is something called the egocentric bias. It's not that we're all narcissists, it's just that we can't escape our own heads. We have privileged access to our own thoughts and feelings. When you trip on the sidewalk, you feel the jolt in your ankle and the rush of adrenaline. You experience the event with 100% of your senses. However, a bystander only sees a half-second stumble and then goes back to thinking about their grocery list. We struggle to realize that others don't have access to our internal monologue of embarrassment. They see the edit, while we are stuck watching the behind-the-scenes footage of our lives, complete with all the bloopers. Interestingly, the spotlight effect doesn't just apply to our mistakes. We also overestimate how much people notice our wins or our effort. You might spend an hour doing your hair or picking the perfect outfit, feeling like everyone will be dazzled. But just like with the bad stuff, people generally see the big picture rather than the details. This can feel a bit deflating at first, the idea that people aren't paying that much attention to us. But if you flip the perspective, it's actually incredibly liberating. If people don't notice the perfect things, they definitely aren't obsessing over the imperfect ones. It gives us permission to be human, to be messy, and to just exist without the pressure of a constant audience. So how do we start dimming that spotlight? The first practical step is to embrace the invisible rule. This is the conscious reminder that most people are far too busy thinking about themselves to judge you. Think about the last time you saw someone else make a minor mistake. Maybe they dropped a pen or had a smudge on their glasses. Did you think about it for more than 5 seconds? Probably not. You likely felt a brief flash of empathy and then went right back to your own thoughts. Reminding yourself that you are a supporting character in everyone else's story, not the lead, can instantly lower your social anxiety. It's not that people are mean, it's just that they are preoccupied. Another powerful tool is what psychologists call self-disclosure. If you feel the spotlight burning particularly bright, say you're nervous during a presentation, just mention it. Briefly saying, "I'm a little nervous today," actually breaks the spell. When we name our discomfort, it loses its power over us. It also builds a bridge to others because everyone knows what it feels like to be on the spot. By owning the thing you're afraid people are noticing, you stop trying to hide it. And once you stop hiding, the feeling of being watched starts to fade. You'll find that people are usually much kinder and more supportive than the critical voice in your head suggests. When you feel that surge of self-consciousness, your focus is turned 100% inward. You are monitoring your own breathing, your own expression, and your own words. To break the spotlight effect, you have to manually turn the camera around. Try a technique called external focusing. Look at the room, notice the color of the walls, the sound of the air conditioner, or the specific shade of the shirt the person across from you is wearing. By actively observing your environment, you force your brain to stop overanalyzing your own internal state. It's hard for the spotlight to stay on you when you're busy shining it on the world around you. If you've made a mistake and you're lying in bed at night replaying it, try the 24-hour test. Ask yourself, will anyone involved in this moment remember it 24 hours from now? Usually the answer is no. If you're still worried, push it further. Will they remember it in a week? A month? We tend to view our minor blunders as permanent marks on our reputation, but social memory is incredibly short. People have their own lives, their own dramas, and their own mistakes to worry about. Your cringe moment is just a tiny blip in their day that will be replaced by 1,000 other thoughts by tomorrow morning. This one sounds scary, but it's effective. Try being imperfect on purpose. Go to the grocery store with messy hair or wear mismatched socks. Do something small that triggers that people are watching feeling, and then observe what actually happens. You'll quickly realize that the sky doesn't fall. No one points and laughs. Most people won't even glance your way. This is called habituation. By exposing yourself to the thing you fear, minor social judgment, you teach your nervous system that you are safe. You start to realize that the spotlight was never actually turned on. You can move through the world with much more freedom when you realize you don't have to be camera ready at all times. Understanding the spotlight effect doesn't mean you'll never feel embarrassed again. We are social creatures and we care about what others think. That's normal. But it does mean you can stop letting that feeling control your life. You can take that dance class you've been avoiding, or speak up in that meeting, or wear that bold outfit you love. When you realize that the audience isn't nearly as large or as critical as you thought, the world becomes a much friendlier place. You aren't under a microscope, you're just one person among many, all trying to find their way. There is a quiet, beautiful freedom in being unnoticed. In short, the spotlight effect is just your brain's way of trying to keep you safe, but it often does so by exaggerating reality. People are generally kind, mostly distracted, and almost always focused on their own lives. So next time you feel that heat in your cheeks, take a breath and remember, you're doing just fine and no one is keeping score. We've all been the person who tripped or spilled the coffee. Have you ever had a moment where you felt the spotlight was on you, only to realize later that nobody noticed? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. It helps us all feel a little less alone in our cringe moments. If this helped you breathe a little easier, please consider subscribing to Curious Pod. See you in the next one.